He says he wants a partner with a plan, a life mapped in calendars, bullet points, and measurable milestones. He speaks of balance, efficiency, and fairness, as though love were a ledger to be reconciled. His words are precise, polished, and reassuring, but beneath them lies a quiet tension, a rigidity that shields a more complicated interior. He praises clarity and order, yet his gaze drifts toward the woman who moves like water, unpredictable and alive, whose laughter cannot be scheduled, whose presence cannot be tamed. She exists outside of tidy categories, and in her, something in him stirs that he cannot name aloud. His mouth seeks a calm, predictable partnership, while his body yearns for aliveness, for the currents that he cannot control. This contradiction is not failure. It is the natural pulse of a man divided between persona and soul. Persona is the mask the world applauds, disciplined, composed, endlessly rational. It speaks in logic, in fairness, in promises carefully ordered. Persona shields him from the storms he fears inside himself. Beneath the mask lives his anima, the inner feminine, who does not measure or negotiate. She is a current of life, a rhythm that speaks in music, laughter, weather, and quiet, uncontainable moments. She reminds him that love cannot be planned in spreadsheets. It must be experienced, felt, and surrendered to. He is torn between safety and surrender, control and freedom. One part of him seeks structure, another reaches for wildness, for the raw moments that make the heart ache and expand. This division is the origin of mixed signals. The mouth promises order, while the soul craves depth. He has been taught competence over communion, logic over wonder. He praises the woman who appears manageable, predictable, who mirrors his carefully curated life, and yet, in secret, he dreams of the woman who mirrors his breath, who awakens the parts of his persona that have long been buried. His anima stirs in dreams, music, and fleeting fascination. She is unseen yet relentless, an echo beneath the polished surface, the life he denies in daylight but cannot ignore in shadow. She is the presence that will not be organized, measured, or tamed. The woman who reads the tremor behind his words sees what persona cannot express. She notices the longing for presence behind tidy sentences, the unspoken ache for connection, for life beyond control. She knows the difference between what he says and what he truly needs. When he begins to face his inner depth, when he acknowledges tremors, fears, and shadows, the mask softens, persona steps aside, and presence emerges. Desire shifts from conquest to companionship, from control to surrender, from safety to truth. He learns that love is not tidy. It is alive, messy, and transformative. Boundaries become doors, not walls. Vulnerability becomes strength, not weakness. He discovers that depth cannot be outsourced to a partner. It must be met within himself first. Only then can he meet a woman who reflects his anima authentically, without expectation or projection. Until that moment, the wise woman honors her own river. She stands in her own light, tending to her heart, refusing to shrink for someone else's persona. She knows that mixed signals are not a test of her worth. They are a reflection of his divided self. She recognizes that chemistry without courage becomes a wound disguised as connection. She understands that patience is not silence, and presence is not performance. She waits not in hope, but in grounded clarity, knowing that her own life is enough. She notices the subtle signs, when his eyes soften, when his breath relaxes, when the mask falters enough to reveal truth. These are small, almost imperceptible, yet vital signs that the inner work has begun. Presence arrives quietly, like sunlight through a window. If he steps fully into his own depth, the woman who has waited for authenticity meets him not as a savior, not as a project, but as a partner. They meet where life flows freely, where hands are warm, eyes clear, hearts steady. Mutual respect and honesty replace projection and performance. If he does not step, she remains whole. She blesses what was true, closes the door gently, and keeps her heart soft but firm. She knows that love is not scarce and that clarity attracts what is real, not convenient. This is the wisdom of anima and persona. A man's words are not always a map to his soul. True connection requires courage, honesty, and the willingness to meet oneself first. She waits, not in hope, but in strength, knowing that the river flows whether he enters it or not. He often speaks of balance, yet he confuses control for stability. He insists on fairness, yet forgets that love cannot be measured on paper. He seeks a partner who is quiet and predictable, yet his eyes follow the woman whose spirit refuses boundaries. He schedules love-like appointments, yet secretly longs to lose track of time with someone uncontainable. He rehearses sentences about shared responsibilities, while his body remembers what it feels like to surrender, to be moved, to be fully seen. The woman who reads between the lines understands that his persona is not cruelty. It is protection. It is the armor he built to survive, to win approval, to navigate a world that rewards control and punishes vulnerability. His anima speaks in subtleties, the laughter that fills a room, the pause that invites reflection, the warmth that softens rigid structures. She does not argue, negotiate, or demand. She simply exists, and in her existence, she calls him to step into life fully. He fears the unknown, yet the unknown is where life breathes. Persona prefers tidy equations, but anima thrives in rhythm, improvisation, and connection. She asks for presence, not perfection, depth, not appearances, aliveness, not safety. When he begins to integrate his persona and anima, the mixed signals fade. He no longer needs to control her light because he has found his own. He no longer mistakes fascination for fear, nor chemistry for clarity. Love becomes simple, honest, and warm. The woman who honors her own river no longer chases. She no longer tries to manage or predict the currents of another's inner life. She meets presence with presence, honesty with honesty, depth with depth. Her boundaries are not walls. They are invitations to respect. She witnesses the difference between performance and authenticity. She recognizes when someone speaks polished sentences without a pulse, and when the pulse is aligned with truth. She knows the weight of unspoken longing, the ache that masquerades as stability. His growth is not her responsibility. She does not build bridges for him. She waits for him to build them for himself. When he meets his own anima, he does not need to project his depth onto another. He can give love without borrowing it, without hiding it, without fear. This process transforms desire. Drama loses its allure. Integrity becomes radiant, simple, and undeniable. Presence is the new currency, and attention, the new luxury. Words can align with energy, and chemistry finally becomes a reflection of authenticity. The woman who has waited, observed, and honored herself meets him not as a savior, not as a project, but as a companion. Together, they inhabit a space where life is not managed, but lived, where love is not controlled, but allowed to breathe. If he is not ready, she remains whole. She blesses what was real, releases what was performative, and honors her own light. She trusts the river within herself and knows it is enough. Individuation, the process Jung described, is his responsibility. He integrates mask and marrow, logic and mystery, fear and tenderness. He learns that courage is the willingness to feel, that vulnerability is a form of strength, and that presence is the bridge to real intimacy. As he grows, she notices the change. Eyes soften, words align with energy, hands reach without demand, boundaries hold without rigidity. Authenticity becomes the language of their shared space. Love becomes a partnership, not a performance. Desire transforms from conquest to invitation, from control to shared rhythm. The woman who honors her river is no longer waiting for clarity. She embodies it. She no longer translates confusion into hope or confusion into forgiveness. She honors her needs, protects her boundaries, and trusts her intuition. She knows the difference between projection and presence, between image and soul. And if he cannot meet this presence, she walks forward with the dignity of someone who knows her sky. She loves without losing herself, blesses without bargaining, and trusts that life has enough room for both the river that is hers and the river that is his.